What's the solution so we can move on to bigger things here, to this funding expiration? We've got 10 days to figure it out. Do you kick the can until March?
Yeah, I think we're going to end up doing a short-term CR until March. There's a lot of things that we need to do, Joe. We have disaster relief that we need to deal with. You know, I'm in the eastern part of North Carolina, but I've been over to the west, which is absolute devastation. We need to help the infrastructure. We need to help our farmers. There are a lot of things that we need to do before the end of this session, and I feel very confident we're going to have to get that done. It'll have to be through a CR, though.
Mm-hmm.
Is that disaster relief going to amount to something close to what the White House has asked for, in the ballpark of $100 billion?
Yeah, Kayleigh, there's a lot of stuff in there that, as usual with our Democratic colleagues, they love to throw in a bunch of wish lists. And the Speaker and a lot of other individuals have started to go through this list, throwing things out that really are not related to disaster relief. We, again, have to be responsible to the taxpayer, but at the same time deliver the relief and the aid that people who have experienced the disasters need. We don't need to go funding projects unrelated to this issue.
Well, let's move on to the new Congress here and the magical word of reconciliation, Congressman, because that brings opportunity for the majority, even a very thin one, as Republicans will have in the House. What's your thought on sequencing here, and are we even having the right conversation? There seems to be a choice between border first or tax cuts. Why not do both?
Well, we can do both. We've been working, Chairman Smith, on Ways and Means. We've been traveling around the country. We've had tax teams over the last 6-10 months diving into this issue and looking what happened in 2017 and what can we carry forward. How do we do that best? What policies worked? Maybe what policies didn't work as well for the American people. We want to put together a pro-growth tax policy that allows the country to grow, allows taxpayers to keep as much money as possible, at the same time making sure we keep an eye on our deficit and our debt, rather, and making sure we're being good stewards of that looming problem that's happening in the country at the same time. That said, you know, the border, President Trump could fix so many things, and he will on day one. Same thing with energy. You know, the Senate, Senator Thune was talking about a two-bill approach or a two reconciliation approach. We're trying to also think about one, getting it done in an efficient manner that way.
Well, and if it is to be done in the first 100 days, which the president-elect has expressed a desire to see his 2017 tax cuts extended by the time that marker is reached, the majority is going to be incredibly thin, perhaps just a vote of one. How hard is just that majority going to make getting this done in an expeditious manner, whether it's one package or two?
Yeah, Kayleigh, it's going to be difficult. I won't, blanch that at all. It's going to be very difficult. We have a lot of folks that want the SALT issue revisited, revised, and taken care of. You know, I don't know why, the federal government has to bail out blue states, but I think it's an important item.
But President-elect Trump expressed support for that during his campaign.
Yeah. Well, it depends upon, I don't disagree. It depends upon what that support means. So we go back to pre-2017 where it was not an issue at all, or do we increase the limits to just something that's a little bit more palatable for some of the more conservative members? I think there's a lot of threading through the eye of the needle that needs to be done, but there's no time to waste. We need to get to this. There is something that we need to do as immediately as we can and try to get people who maybe have some differing views on where the tax package needs to go at the table sooner than later so we can hash this out.
You do wonder what some of the added ideas might mean for simply extending or making permanent the 2017 tax cuts. You add no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, SALT. I think some members like yourself might be wrestling over. Doesn't that make it more difficult to get the base legislation through?
It does, Joe. I'm not going to say it does not. The tax on tips was a huge issue that the president and even the vice president talked about in her race, looking at Social Security, looking at some of the other things to try to free up money for Americans. We have to look at this carefully, though. We're, again, Ways and Means, we're kind of the committee that really has great stewardship over the tax dollar. How do we best affect these policies to help the American people, but at the same time be the best stewards to the American taxpayer?
Well, and when we consider other sources of revenue, the president-elect at least has argued that some of the offset of lower tax rates could be the fact that he would like to tariff imports into the United States at a higher rate. But as we talk about the kind of being responsible to the American taxpayer, the American consumer, that could result in higher costs for them. So what is the appropriate tariff tax balance here in your mind, Congressman?
Sure. And I think that's a valid concern, Kayleigh. I don't personally think tariffs should be used as a revenue source. I think they should be used as a negotiating tool when we have folks in other countries that are not acting in the best interest of the American people. And that, President Trump has shown his nimble way of dealing with those individuals. We don't want to raise prices in this country. We don't want to increase inflation, which is the real issue of what's going on in the economy now. That said, again, threading this needle is going to be difficult, but I have every faith in the members who are going to be at the table working through this to try to make sure it's good policy for America and good policy for the American taxpayer.
Congressman Murphy, there's an interesting process going on next door in the Senate right now as the process of confirming Donald Trump's picks for the cabinet get underway here. We're, of course, not at the point of having hearings yet, but we're learning a lot more about some of the people who he has tapped. And I'll remind our viewers and listeners that you're a physician. You have MD stamped on your congressional website. And there are a lot of questions about the approach that RFK Jr. is taking to traditional medicine. Are you comfortable with some of the alternative ideas that he's brought forth, his concerns, for instance, about some vaccines, his concerns about obesity drugs that have been quite the rage recently? Are those changes needed, or are they to be avoided?
Well, looking at things totally, there are some issues that I do not agree with RFK on. But what I think is good is the fact that we're going to disrupt the decades-old legacy of thoughts that A plus B always equals C. It's okay to question things in medicine. It's okay to question things in science. We saw during the last 4 years, especially with Fauci during the pandemic, that they threw politics into this. This is what's happening in our medical schools now, throwing politics into science. So it's okay to question some of the things that have gone on in effort to spark good, objective debate. Are we going to agree on everything with JFK? I don't think so. But it's okay, again, to have somewhat for disruption for a good reason to bring that in as part of the discussion.
And just finally, sir, are you not concerned at all about vaccines specifically and the questions it could raise around the science and efficacy of them as we consider long-term public health?
Sure. Absolutely, Kayleigh. And, prior to the pandemic, it was a well-understood, statement throughout all of medicine that vaccines were to be used for at-risk populations. And even Fauci said that at the beginning, then he changed his mind. And this is where RFK is pulling off of this. Sadly enough, because Fauci did so many things to push vaccines, which I was a promotion of, but only for individuals who are at risk. Now the CDC is pushing the COVID vaccine for kids 6 months and older. I think that's absolutely absurd. And so what's happened is a great amount of vaccine hesitancy, even for things for polio, even things for measles, which in my opinion have to be part of our childhood vaccine question. But again, it's good. We have to get the trust back of the American citizen and the American patient back in American medicine. And I think this is a healthy way to do it.